In today's episode of Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek, we are joined by Peter Bakwin, co-creator at fastestknowntime.com. We dive deep on all things FKT related, including his take on some of the more controversial FKTs, the proper way to document a speed record, and how he spearheaded this community. We also talk about Peter's long and impressive background in backpacking and ultra running, including his unmatched rock-hard hard rock run. We also have a new unpopular opinion segment, a patent pending, and much more. But before we get to all of that, I want to give a shout out to those who pay for our PBRs.
If you listen to Backpacker Radio, you'll know that Zach and I are big fans of Gossamer Gear, manufacturers of lightweight backpacking gear and accessories. Their packs carry comfortably, their roomy shelters protect in harsh weather conditions, and their trekking poles are some of the lightest on the planet. Gossamer Gear is changing the perception of ultralight, delicate gear. Zach and I are both users of Gossamer Gear's packs and shelters. Zach used the Gorilla, their 40-liter pack, on the PCT, and their new model on his recent hikes on the Wind River High Route and in Colorado. He also uses a handful of their accessories like the Light Flex hiking umbrella, which works for both the sun and the rain, protecting his fragile ginger skin, and the Hipster, their lightweight fanny pack. I carried the One as my shelter on the AT and PCT, which is both roomy and light, weighing in at less than 1.5 pounds.
How did it work for you?
So good. As you already know, it's the one you need. Listeners of Backpacker Radio can score an exclusive deal on Gossamer Gear products. Use discount code TREK15, that's TREK and the number 15, for 15% off your cart at gossamergear.com, which is only valid for a limited time.
And of course, we want to give a thank you to Sawyer Products. Odds are you've already got a good amount of trail miles under your hip belt pockets or fanny pack this year, and as a result, your Sawyer squeeze has gotten a great amount of use. We want to remind you to take the time to backflush your filter, whether using a regular squeeze or the micro, to ensure that it maintains its maximum flow rate. A cleaning pleasure is included with your Sawyer filter for exactly this reason. Cleaning your squeeze is as easy as Sunday morning. We'll include a link to a YouTube video demonstrating just how simple this is. And in case you forgot, the Sawyer Squeeze filter comes with a lifetime warranty, while the Sawyer Micro is good for up to 100,000 gallons. Sawyer's filters feature a hollow fiber membrane technology, which is 75% stronger than other fibers on the market. The filters remove 99.99999% of bacteria, that's 5 nines, and 99.9999% of protozoa and cysts, that's 4 nines. 5 plus 4, that equals 9. Coincidence? Did we just join the Illuminati? All of their filters are tested 3 times before leaving their facility to ensure that they are operational, a claim that no other domestic water filtration company can make. And lastly, all Sawyer filters remove 100% of microplastics. You can find the regular or micro squeeze at your local outfitter, REI, or Sawyer.com. Okay, to the show. To Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek. I am your co-host, Zach Badger Davis, and sitting to my right is...
Hi, I'm Juliana Chauncey, a.k.a. Chaunce.
No beating around the bush today. We're going to jump right into our interview with Peter Bakwin, the creator of fastestknowntime.com. Here he is. We are joined here by Peter Bakwin of fastestknowntime.com. Now, I know you've got a long, illustrious resume, so I apologize if that's too truncated of an intro for you, but let's start there because I think that's one of the more interesting things about what I know about you. So first and foremost, if you could please just introduce what fastestknowntime.com is and what the inspiration for creating this was.
Yeah, fastest known time is a fancy term for speed record, and it pays homage to the fact that we don't actually know on a lot of trails or mountain ascents what the true record is, because a lot of people don't talk about what they do. So these are speed records that happen outside of racing, and typically, like I said, they're mountain ascents have been traditional speed records. So everybody in a local community might know what's the speed record for running up a particular mountain. People have been doing that for generations. But of course, with the advent of the internet now, you don't have to be in the local community to find out what the speed record is on something somewhere. Besides mountain ascents, also like trails, just like a named trail, the John Muir Trail. What's the speed record on the John Muir Trail, or fastest known time? So, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I was interested in this stuff coming from an ultra running background, and, I was doing some racing, but I was also just more interested for my personal interest was more like doing speed records myself, individual adventures, trails that turned me on. And I found it difficult to find out what the speed records were. And one example was the John Muir Trail. This is kind of a big deal trail. It's a world-class trail. What was the speed record? And in fact, I found out that there were known speed records going back at least to the 1940s, but it was very hard to find out what they were because those people were dead.
Yeah. When was the John Muir Trail even created?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but it's been around for a long time. I think it may have been a sort of organic arising of trails and then became more determined and set in stone over time. And I know that the route of the John Muir Trail has changed over time. But John Muir himself had talked about, walking from Yosemite to Whitney. So, just the concept had been around at least since the 19th century. So, anyway, in the early days of the internet, I was sort of trying to find out what the speed record was because we wanted to go and try to run the John Muir Trail. And it was actually quite difficult to find out. So then I started collecting whatever I would hear about in terms of trails or running across the Grand Canyon, like the Rim to Rim to Rim, for example. And I just put it on a little super simple website because there were like 30 or 40 things. And then I invited people to send me anything they knew about. And the database started to grow. And so at some point I was like, well, I got to put this on a more usable sort of website. So I put it onto a bulletin board, kind of a free bulletin board server.
That was the ProBoard website?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that became more and more sort of successful. And at some point because the bulletin board format isn't great for this type of stuff. It's just, it's hard to search and the organization of it isn't great. So at some point it became obvious that was either going to sort of collapse under the weight of its own success or we were going to do something else. So not being a web designer person, I teamed up with two other people, Buzz Burrell and Jeff Schuler, and we created a little business called fastestknowntime.com. And so Jeff is the guy who does the website stuff, and so now it's database format. It's much more usable and searchable and much better. And that launched about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. It looks great, by the way.
Thanks.
I was just starting to understand the ProBoard website when you unleashed the fastestknowntime.com, and it is a big improvement. So you mentioned that it was a business. I didn't even know this. So how does the website generate revenue?
Business, yeah. I mean, in the sense that it currently supports its expenses pretty much.
Yeah.
And simply by people who like it sending donations primarily.
Got it.
We've not wanted to clutter up the site with advertising. There's a little bit of advertising, but in general, it's mostly just donations or Patreon subscribers.
Gotcha. Is there a very clear donation page on the homepage?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
Well,
and so we really appreciate that as it helps us, pay our server costs and nobody's making a living on this thing.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you were looking into info for the John Muir Trail. Have you pursued any other speed records besides that one?
I myself have done many, and partly because I have the website myself, I manage the website myself, I can put whatever I do on there. So, I've done the John Muir Trail. Buzz Burrell and I set the speed record on the the circuit at Torres del Paine in Chile, which is just like a world-class, 6-day backpack.
Yeah.
And
that's the image you see when you Google Patagonia is the Torres del Paine.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We did another route that was much more obscure down in Tierra del Fuego on that same trip, which was billed by Lonely Planet anyway as the southernmost trek in the world on the island of Tierra del Fuego. And then some local stuff. There's a little mountain in Boulder called Mount Sanitas, which is actually right behind my house.
It's Sanitas.
It is.
I've been saying Sanitas for a decade at least.
Everybody says Sanitas, but in fact it's Sanitas, and I know since I grew up within half a mile of that place.
We need like a breaking news sound effect to enter here because that just blew my mind. Okay, sorry.
That's how everyone knows you're a transplant.
Exactly. Right. But you knew that, right?
What?
That it was Sanitas?
This is my first time hearing this mountain's name.
Well, I'm actually surprised you've heard of it, even though we're just 20 miles from there. It's kind of like a little local thing. But it's like every town has its little local test piece. Like here it might be White Ranch Park or something. But anyway, I set the record for running. It's a 3-mile loop.
Yeah.
I set the record for running that 3-mile loop for 12 hours straight.
Whoa.
Wait, you ran the same 3-mile loop for 12 hours?
Yeah, so I did 16 laps around.
Damn. So I'm guessing you run up the steep side and then down the more gentle.
You can do it either direction, and I found in those days when I was young and fit that it was actually faster for me to go up as long as I could run up the more gradual stuff. It was actually better for me, so I did most of the laps.
What's the appeal of doing a 3-mile loop over and over and over and over again?
In fact, it was training for something else, and it was right by my house. And my friend had done, this is back in the early 2000s, he came and he said, I'm going to run 24 hours of this loop. And so, we were sitting there having beer or whatever, and I said, oh, well, you can't do 24 laps. So, of course, that became the target for him for 24 hours, and he ran 24 loops in 24 hours. And then he did a 12-hour, and he did 14 laps. And so, it was just, that's how this fastest known time thing goes. It's like friends challenging each other.
Who can out-crazy the other person.
Yeah. And it's a little bit like the Strava leaderboard now.
Yeah, right.
But, so anyway, we pushed each other on this thing. And then he eventually ran 30 laps, which was 100 miles of Mount Sanitas. It's totally nuts because it's. I think the 100-miler has like 40,000 feet of elevation gain. Like it's more than the Hard Rock 100.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a nice
steep
little ass kicker of a hike if you're looking for something short in Boulder. It's beautiful too. It's a great hike.
I just picture someone like sitting on a bench in Boulder and like seeing the same person run past and then run past again and just like
I'm gonna say the person
watching.
Sitting on the bench for 12 hours has as many problems as the person running laps around
they've
them.
got to be questioning their sanity at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
It's a very popular hike, so when you're doing laps like that, which is actually not uncommon, you'll go around and you'll see the same person, still hiking. And they'll say, "Oh, you're going for 2 laps," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm on lap 12 actually."
Kind of an oddball question. Have you ever been told that you look like Andrew Skirka before?
No,
you had never heard that.
No, I have not.
Have you? You've seen pictures
I've
of
seen
Andrew.
his picture. Yeah, you should put him for Halloween.
Yeah, just put on the visor and you're there pretty much. Yeah. All right.
I need to get rid of some of the gray, but yeah.
We'll put the images side by side, and you guys can let me know if I'm crazy.
That sounds fun.
So fastest known times were a thing before you created the pro board, but was it known as fastest known time, or was it just simply speed records?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Where did the term fastest known time come from? And I believe that I heard it first relative to the speed climbing community in Boulder. A guy named Bill Wright, who is big in the speed climbing world, and in fact wrote a book about speed climbing techniques with Hans Florien. I think I heard it from him first, and he actually had a little website where he was keeping track of speed climbing and speed running things. It was a very informal kind of website, and it kind of he didn't really maintain it very much. It was like a little side project for him.
Yeah.
And he didn't call it fastest known time, so I don't remember. I think he just called it like trail records or speed records or something. But he was an early pioneer of, that. And I think he might have come up with the term. But it resonated with me because, like I said, it's, known is important.
Yeah, right.
There's plenty of people out there doing crazy stuff and not talking about it.
Understood. And then whose idea was it to create the different categories for FKTs? Because I know there's supported, unsupported, and self-supported.
Well, that came up sort of immediately when you start putting things on the internet, and we wanted to sort of, so you should really talk about what the categories are. So, supported is something that will resonate with somebody coming from an ultra running background like me, where, in a race, you have aid stations, you have people giving you stuff, you carry a little, waist pack or vest with a bottle of water and a couple of energy bars, but not much else. And then on the other end, unsupported means that you're basically, nobody's supporting you in any way. You're carrying everything you need from start to finish, except maybe water that you might collect from a pond or a stream. And then there's an in-between category we call self-supported, which is kind of what like thru-hikers do.
Right.
You go into a store, you buy something.
Yeah.
But you don't have a dedicated support person.
I've noticed on the website, or maybe it was just the pro board, it was self-supported, and then in parentheses, it was thru-hiker style.
Yeah.
Is that still there?
So, yeah, I suppose it probably still says that.
Okay.
Because a lot of people resonate with that.
Right.
But what we were trying to do is, kind of formalize what people were already doing, because people were already doing these three different styles. And so just to make it fair, you kind of need categories if people are, because doing the John Muir Trail unsupported is a very different thing than doing it fully supported.
Mm-hmm.
So, Francois Diane, who's probably the best 100-mile trail racer in the world right now, went and ran the John Muir Trail with full support. He really didn't carry much more at any time than a water bottle. He had people running with him every step of the way and so on. And then, another person came along and did it fully unsupported, carrying all of his food from start to finish. 3 days worth of food is a fair amount of weight. And,
yeah.
If he needs to take a nap, he's just got to, make himself comfortable. Whereas Francois had somebody to carry a sleeping bag or whatever.
Right. So what do you make of someone like Stringbean, who I know he doesn't own the overall record anymore, but he set the Appalachian Trail record, I want to say 2016, 2017, as a self-supported hiker. He broke the supported time as a self-supported hiker. And then someone else, I think it was still Carl Meltzer, owned the supported record. So what do you make of that dichotomy when someone who does a more challenging version of the hike only owns the category of what they did versus... I'm doing a bad job articulating this, but I hope the message is getting across.
Yeah. So, people do come in with this question, like, can I get the supported record if I'm slow? Like, for some trails, maybe there's not a supported record, but there's a self-supported record. Can I get the supported record if I'm slower than the self-supported record or the unsupported record? And I say, no, you can't, because everything that Stringbean did on the Appalachian Trail qualifies under supported. So he essentially, technically, and in fact, has both at that time when he set the overall record self-supported.
What happens, for example, like let's say someone breaks a record on the AT in 2016, and like every year the trail gets longer, there's more miles added. Does any questions come up with that, where it's like a different trail, it's more miles?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the AT is the AT, whatever it is today, and so hopefully they're making it harder and not easier.
Yeah.
So you just have to do more than the last guy. Where this gets very contentious is generally more like the PCT, because every year sections of the PCT are closed because of fires. And so what do? Do you have to... so there are people who will say, no, it's not the PCT speed record. It's not the FKT on the PCT unless you walk every step of the PCT. And other people say, well, I just have to walk whatever is the official route this year. So, that has become a pretty contentious issue.
Yeah.
I guess in my mind, what I was thinking is like, let's say someone does like the AT. I'm just gonna say random numbers, but let's say they made a record of the AT and it was 2,180 miles, and the next guy does it when it's 2,192 miles, and he misses the record by like 10 hours, and it's like, oh well, but I did 12 more miles.
Yep.
How do you get into that? How do you play referee on that type of stuff?
So I don't view myself as the referee on this. I view the community as the referee. And so I just put it on the website. We were very clear. You should say exactly what you did. And if somebody else doesn't like it, they can complain, basically, and say why it doesn't count. So I haven't seen that kind of conflict on the AT itself. But like I said, with the PCT, yes, people have said, okay, well, I had to skip this section and do a road walk because of fires. And somebody else will say, well, that's not the PCT. It doesn't count.
Huh. It was that Belgian runner that did it after Anish. Is that what you're referencing? Yeah.
So he had to skip a bunch because of fires. And, that was it was contentious. And I think for the last several years, maybe 10 years, 8 years, I don't think there's been a single year when you could walk every step of the PCT.
Yeah. Now, when you first created this website, did you envision all the clusterfuckery that was going to come of what you had created? Did you envision the world where people are going to be like nitpicking the different versions of the hikes? It does sound stressful. It does sound stressful.
It's no, I didn't really envision that, but it doesn't, I like the community aspect of it, and I want the community to get involved in these discussions. Like I said, I'm not going to adjudicate if there's a conflict for the AT. I go to the people that I know who know the AT, and I say, what's up, and is this good? Is this bad? What the heck? So I like the community aspect of it. I like that people are, passionate about it. Where I get upset is when people try to use these like categories or rules. I call them guidelines. To be able to do something. Like I said, somebody might say, "Oh, well, there's no supported record on this trail. Can I get the supported record even if it's slower than the unsupported record?" And I say, hey, bring yourself up to the route. Don't bring the route down to you.
Right.
So,
well, if you need more people to join this Appalachian Trail Committee, I hiked it in 2011. Drink.
Yeah.
And Chauncey actually just hiked it this year.
Awesome.
Drink again.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We're just trying to keep our listeners drunk. There's a drinking game involved with the podcast. Every time that we reference the fact that we hiked the AT, people have to drink. So
I was thinking about how to make it like less alcoholic, and I was thinking I should drink every time I get congratulated.
That's going to be less alcoholic.
At the moment, it's making it more alcoholic, but I feel like everyone tells you to drink, and then everyone congratulates me.
Exactly. So that is kind of a
so we
double. I guess yours is fresh. Yours is hot out of the oven.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'll drink again.
Well done. Yeah, at this point, if that's the rules you want to play by, you're going to need to get your stomach pumped here soon.
Yeah, I'll just get my ego hyped all the time. People will just be coming up left and right congratulating me.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of contentious AT records, what was your take during the entire this? And I'm sure probably digging up something that is covered in years of dust at this point. The Caja Bertolini, the wild card FKT fiasco. Yeah. And I'll give a brief intro as to what that was.
Yes.
I forget the year. I want to say 2015, 2016. There was someone who was doing a yo-yo through hike. She had done, I think, most of the AT northbound, and on the southbound version, she halfway into it publicly stated her intentions to set the self-supported FKT. This was also the same year that Carl Meltzer was going for the record, I believe.
The supported.
Yeah, the supported record. This was someone that had no endurance background whatsoever. She was a nobody in this community from that standpoint. And Meltzer had set the record at 45 days and some amount of hours. And then she came in and stated that she had completed the trail as a self-supported hiker in, I think, 41 days, shaving 4 days off of Carl Meltzer's record. And there was a lot of shady stuff with it from the standpoint. She didn't have any GPS tracking. There were people, I think, calling to question her feats, people that saw her on trail that thought maybe she was skipping miles based on like the timeline of what she was doing. There were other things. It's not fresh on my memory. We have a couple of very good articles on the website about it, but I'm curious to get...
Wait, what was the outtake first before we get the take?
Outtake.
Like, what was the outcome? Did she get the record?
Peter will...
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, that was an interesting situation. And, every situation like this that comes up, we sort of learn more about, guidelines. And so we had already had a guideline that you should carry a GPS tracker and a real-time tracker if you're going for a speed record.
Yeah.
But it's a guideline. It's not a rule. And Kaya, made the point, because I emailed with her, and she made the point that her claimed record was as well documented as the previous person, which was a good point and was actually true, because there was nobody reporting this stuff. It was just word of mouth. And so she said, why are you picking on me, basically? But as I said, I don't know about the AT, so I found some people who did, and we worked together to try to look at the documentation that she provided, and look at all of the reports of her on the trail and try to piece together what she had actually done. And, long story short, we came to the conclusion that she basically, what do you call it? Yellow blazed sections.
Yeah.
So, and there was literally I got in contact with somebody who'd given her a ride.
Yeah.
So
the wild part about that is, are you talking about referring to the Shenandoah section that she had skipped? The guy that gave her a ride didn't know anything about the context of who she was or what she was going for. And this is kind of creepy, but I guess fills in some of the gaps about the story. He had taken a picture of her, I don't think without her permission. So she wasn't aware of the fact that she had been documented in the car. So she was still holding...
Dude, that's like what happened in Uncle Johnny's.
Did
I ever tell you about that?
No.
Oh, I was at Uncle John. Sorry, this is so off topic. We can get back to it later.
Yeah. We'll come back to this.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it. So sorry, we interrupted you.
No, so that was it. And so we never made a pronouncement that she didn't set the record. I just, of course, at the time she was getting just lambasted on the internet because people didn't believe her, and she was kind of a quirky personality, and they not only didn't believe her, but they didn't like her, basically. And she was trying to raise money for some charity.
Right.
And people thought that maybe she was actually taking the money, and
it was going to a PayPal account and not to through a verified charity website.
She was getting ripped apart on the internet, and so I emailed her and I said, this is our conclusion, and here's, the evidence that we have. And basically our conclusion is, there's not good verification for this. So, and I said, my suggestion is that you just stop talking about it. Because if you continue talking about it, you're going to continue to get ripped apart on the internet.
Yeah. So
that was the end of it. And I think she pretty much stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm going to come back next year and set this record.
Right. It didn't happen. I feel bad even bringing it up because that was such an ugly situation. To me, my take is it was very obvious that she was lying. Like there was evidence pointing the fact that she was lying. But at the same time, I did not like the way the internet was responding to it. Is I think people get too much on their high horse and will drag people through the mud. Yeah. I think there are probably some issues happening there, but the way people were responding was just people were going too far with it.
I mean, it was the same thing with. Did you hear about the Artemis things from this summer?
I only on a tertiary level noticed it.
I mean, I didn't really follow it too closely. It was the same type of thing where it was like the internet just turned on this person and just tore them apart.
Yeah. So if you're out there listening and you're planning on doing a phony thru hike, let yourself know that you are running into the wolf's den. You are putting yourself into a situation where the entire internet might come down on you.
Yes, and I have to say that the verification guidelines that we provide, which are very carefully thought out and responding to many of these situations like the one we've just been talking about, they're not only to protect the veracity of the fastest known time, but they're to protect you.
Yeah.
Because if somebody comes out and says you didn't do what you said you did, how can we know that that person is incorrect? And this came up recently with a very prominent, one of the more prominent FKTs, a short FKT in the United States, one that has, the person who did the FKT was probably, having done it, it had some impact on their sponsorships and so on. And somebody else said months later, oh, they didn't do it. And explained a mode of cheating that was consistent with all the data that we had about the verification materials that had been submitted to us. And, so I investigated with others who were familiar with the situation and came to the conclusion that actually the person had done it, but the other person had lied because they were trying to get at this person.
Interesting.
So, yeah, good verification protects you.
Yeah.
As well as, making it believable.
Sure. So on that note, correct me if I'm wrong. Once upon a time, it seemed like the guidelines included suggested GPS verification, and I believe the last time I checked out the website, that is no longer one of the encouraged recommendations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Okay. Because I think it's been a year since I actually looked at the guidelines. I should have done better prep. But I mean, I guess the man himself is here. What would someone listening to this who wants to prove that they're doing a bona fide FKT attempt, what would you suggest? Because I know that there are issues with the GPS thing. I can speak to the fact that I had a spot device with me and I did the tracking mode. And for my wife, who wanted, peace of mind when I wasn't in cell range that I was still alive, and she said there were days where it wasn't reporting any information.
On the AT.
This was on the PCT actually,
PCT.
Like through the Sierra section. I'm not sure what was happening, but there was like gaps where she thought I was dead because it wasn't reporting anything.
Yeah, so we have recommended that for anything longer than like a day, that you use real-time tracking like a Spot or a Garmin. And unfortunately, the Spot device doesn't really work well under dense tree cover, and so it's been actually crappy on the AT in particular. And there was a situation with this guy called Knots, who claimed the self-supported FKT a couple of 3 years ago, and that was before String Bean. And he had a Spot, and it, like in your experience, it just didn't work for days on end.
Yeah.
And it was like burning through batteries, trying to get the messages out. It couldn't get the messages out through the trees, and he was just frustrated as hell with the whole thing.
Yeah.
However, the Garmin units seem to work a lot better. So, and for some routes, maybe the AT, you can actually use real-time tracking that's not based on satellite technology, but based on cell phone technology, because you have a lot of cell service on the AT, for example. And this is like super common in Europe, that they use cell phone trackers that send your position in real time to a website, just like Spot or Garmin.
Interesting.
InReach.
Would that be like a Strava, or what would you recommend? Or I guess there's
so Strava has one called Strava Beacon. Yeah. And again, this is only for places where you got good cell coverage. Right. But could work in a lot of cases. So the important thing about real-time tracking is that people can see where you are. It's harder to cheat, basically. Yeah. In order to cheat, you would have to give somebody your tracker and have them run with it. Whereas if you just come up with a Strava track after the fact, well, it's not that hard to falsify a GPS track. And in fact, there used to be, I don't know if there still are, websites that would do that for you. There was a website at one time, I think it's gone now, called Digital EPO, where you would take your GPS file and run it through Digital EPO, create a faster time, put it on Strava, and say, hey, gee, look what I did. So, it's not that hard to falsify a GPS track, and that's why I say real-time tracking is better, because it's harder. You have to get somebody else to help you cheat.
Yeah.
What are some of the other guidelines?
So it's always been sort of three major things. Before GPS technology, they took pictures and wrote a detailed trip report after the fact. And even like 10 years ago, the speed record on the John Muir Trail, the verification materials was basically photos. And, taking photos with a digital camera, there's time and location stamps. If the camera's a phone and has a GPS in it. So that's actually not bad. But you also have to write a trip report.
Yeah.
And we'd like to see that the trip report makes sense and anybody could read your trip report and say, oh yeah, I saw that guy at that time.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I feel like for the AT and PCT in particular, like that's probably a very valid way to go about it, assuming you can account for every morning, every night, whatever it might be, just because there are so many people on the trail that, and especially if you're making your intentions public, I think people will keep an eye out for you.
Right.
To me, that seems like the best way for high traffic trails. This is coming from the perspective of someone who has spent almost no time paying attention to this, aside from what we've talked about here. So it's interesting to get your take on that.
Yeah. So again, it's threefold. It's the GPS track, photos once in a while, and a detailed trip report.
Yeah. And
if those things all line up, that's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. So you recommend someone gets the Garmin satellite communicator versus that
thing seems to work better. Yeah. It's a little bit more expensive, but
is there one of the GPSs that I was going to say, maybe you just answered it, is better than the other ones? I know there's a lot.
Yeah. So for the real time tracking based on satellite technology, it seems like the Garmin InReach, and now there's this thing called the InReach Mini, which weighs like 4 ounces.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't do anything except talk to the satellite and your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So it has two-way satellite text capability, which is super cool. And you can, like you were on the PCT and your spot wasn't working well, but you could have texted your wife.
Yeah.
And she could have texted you back.
Yeah.
So that's a really good device, I think.
Yeah. Do we beat the FKT subject to death enough?
Yeah, I think so.
I do have one last question. So from the time that you created this to today, what's sort of the rate of increase of what you smell out to be falsified claims? And what do you project for the future for the FKT? Is this a sport? Is it a hobby? Like, how do you classify it?
Mm-hmm. So I will say that, falsified or invalid claims seem to be very, very rare. It's not something that doesn't happen, as we've just discussed. But as far as I know, it seems to be quite rare. And it just sort of makes sense to me, But there have been a few cases where it's definitely been, somebody has definitely tried to cheat, but not much compared to. And there could be plenty of cases on the website that are cheated, that are invalid, but we don't necessarily know.
Yeah. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. Right, Chance?
So, what? Why me?
I don't know why I looked at you.
Rude.
And, most of the routes are not super competitive. They're just sort of like more like cool adventures that people have done. A lot of them are kind of what we call OKTs, only known time. And so Buzz, who's one of my partners on this project, he's called the website kind of a bucket list, because there's a lot of really cool stuff on there. And, every day I get stuff to look at and I'm like, wow, I want to go do that. So anyway, I'm drifting off your question.
Yeah, no. And then I guess kind of the I asked a multi-layered question there, too much to answer in one go. What do you foresee as the future of this? Because obviously we're talking about it. Like this is a subject of, I think, growing interest. What it seems like the future is, obviously there's going to be more sponsorships and more money tied into this, which gives more reason for people to falsify claims. So what do you see as the future of the FKT world?
Yeah. So that is something that's happened only over the last 5 years or so, is the sponsorships, so excuse me, it used to be that, the best ultra runners they might do a fastest known time on something, but it would be training for some race. But now they're actually making these fastest known time efforts, like a centerpiece of their season. So that's a big shift. So the sponsors are actually interested in it and supportive of it. And part of that is probably our website. And part of it is this guy named Killian, who's the best endurance runner of his generation, and really focused on these types of adventures rather than racing, or in addition to racing, I should say. I think like the sponsors should be quite, concerned about verification, and should actually, if you're going to sponsor somebody to do something, you should make sure that they take verification seriously, because if it turns out later that there's a question, it's not good for your brand.
Right.
So I hope the sponsors do take that seriously.
Yeah.
They just get on there and, you see these beautiful videos and woo-woo, and that's great, and it's good for the sport, it's good for the athlete, it's good for the brand, but yeah, if it's not done with integrity, then the whole thing could come crashing down.
Yeah. I know you said that you're not the referee of this. That being said, I still don't envy your position whatsoever. It seems tough. So if you guys are listening to this and you feel for Peter whatsoever, there is a donation page to this. And are there going to be, are you going to necessitate more resources to police this going forward, or have you not thought that far?
Yeah. I'm hoping, I guess, to answer your question, I think what we're going to end up doing is finding that some routes are super competitive, that sponsors are interested, and so on. And those will be designated as, if you're going to claim an FKT on this, you got to stick to the guidelines. You really have to cross all the T's on that. And then others will be more free. And that's just a practical thing as well, because we literally can't, I can't look at the metadata, every single photo that comes across, as verification information. I can't read I don't read every single trip report, in detail.
Right.
I just don't have time.
Sure.
And
So now all the shysters out there listening to this know how they can game the system, because Peter's giving away all his policing secrets.
Yeah, what are your best tips for cheating the system?
But, it's all going to go on the website.
Yeah.
So, if somebody submits something about the Colorado Trail and you happen to really know the Colorado Trail, and you see something that doesn't make sense in their trip report or their data,
Bring him down?
Yeah. Well, no,
it's a community effort.
Just let me know, and we will look into it. Because I have certainly gotten emails that said, "Oh, that guy said he ran this fast on this trail. That can't be right because it's impossible."
Yeah.
And I don't take the position that it's impossible. Like we were talking about Kaya earlier. I didn't take the position that she couldn't have done it, because I didn't know who she was.
Yeah.
I took the position that let's find out. And, if somebody says it's impossible, let's find out. So,
yeah.
I'm a scientist by background, so.
So actually, I didn't have a question on this, but I should bring it up. So you have a degree in physics from Harvard?
Yeah, I have a PhD in physics, and so.
A PhD in physics from Harvard.
The data and I just want to find out what the truth is here.
Yeah.
And sometimes I spend up way too much time on stuff, because I just want to make sure I know what happened. And
we should talk about that for a second. So what was your first job out of school, or like what is your career outside of the endurance sports world?
Yeah, so I worked as a research scientist in atmospheric physics for 20 years, and
is this at NCAR?
At NOAA.
NOAA, okay.
I did work at NCAR briefly as a student, but no, I worked at NOAA in Boulder, and then I quit, retired, something, and
congratulations.
Started doing other things. So
got it.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore, but I still have that background and that sort of mindset of, truth and data.
Yeah.
What's real.
Well, I'm glad we're bringing your skill set to this FKT world, because it seems like it requires that to get it down correctly.
Well, it requires, for the website, it requires 3 people. It requires one person who can do the website. It requires one person who can sort of like interface with people and do some marketing and write articles. And we have a podcast of our own, which is done by Buzz. Mm-hmm. And then it requires somebody who's going to, receive all the FKTs and sort of vet them. And so I could call myself a curator, actually.
Got it. What's the name of your podcast? The FKT podcast?
It's called The Fastest Known Podcast.
Perfect. Ooh. Easy enough. Okay.
30 minutes or less.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I apologize for the conversation taking so much time on that subject. I wasn't planning on it, but it's very interesting, because I know there's a lot of ground to cover here. So we're going to get to that now. Mm-hmm. Backpacking. Talk about some of your background in backpacking, your favorite trips, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I came to backpacking from an ultra runner background. And, when I was working full time and everything, didn't have a lot of time. So I wanted to get a lot done in the small amount of time that I had. So that was like the John Muir Trail speed record. I could fly there on a weekend, run the trail in 4 days, and fly back. And that was a 1-week vacation. But then in 2001, I heard about this guy flying Brian Robinson. And he was hiking the CDT. He was the first guy to do the calendar triple crown. And I read about it on some website, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. I can't believe what this guy is doing. And he's coming on the CDT right near my house. So I said to my friend Buzz and my wife, we got to go meet this guy. So we went out to Grand Lake, Colorado, and found Brian like sleeping in the front entryway of the post office, waiting to pick up his mail drop.
Classic thru-hiker stuff.
And hiked with him for a day, and it just blew my mind what he was doing. His techniques, the whole lightweight backpacking thing was completely outside of my, purview or understanding or consciousness. And he was just putting down miles and having a great time. And he was having a great time in part because he wasn't carrying a big, heavy backpack. And I was like, this is really cool. I could get into this. So I got the opportunity. I got to be quite friendly with Brian, and got the opportunity to hike with him and learn a lot from him. And coming from the ultra runner background, I was just more interested in hiking than camping. So the whole lightweight thing made a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. I just want to, if I'm not walking, I want to be sleeping or eating. And so I did the Brian and I did the Sierra High route. That was a super nice trip.
What year was that?
2009 maybe.
Okay.
Or 12, I don't know.
Who gets credit for creating the route? Is that Skirka?
No, the Sierra High route came from a book by Roper.
Okay.
Skirka and Buzz created the Wind River High route.
Which you did as well, correct?
I did, yeah. So when they were working on the route, the 3 of us went on a trip, and we hiked basically most of the existing Skirka route. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Terrific route. Amazing. Yeah. That
was the subject of the last podcast. Me and a couple buddies attempted to do it, and we ended up getting off a little more than halfway into it. One of the guys was getting pretty bad altitude sickness. Can you verify this? Are the winds the most beautiful, spectacular mountain range in the lower 48?
So Andrew Skirka said halfway to Alaska, and I think that's right. It's
interesting.
Yeah.
So Alaska is twice as beautiful.
Well, it's somewhere in between. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing and beautiful and remote and rugged.
Yeah.
And just today, I think this morning, I put up a speed record on the Skirka Wind River High route. Somebody did it in 63 hours.
Damn.
Wow.
100 miles, much more than 50% off trail.
Uh-huh. Was this, I'm blanking on her name. Was it a woman?
No.
Okay. I know.
So there were 2 women who did it just a couple weeks ago.
Right.
Under 4 days. But this person did it, and I can't remember the name of the person.
Yeah. Did you say 63 hours?
I'm remembering 63 hours. I put it on the website just today. So
that makes me barf. That was the hardest hiking I've ever done in my life. and I don't have a ton of off-trail experience, but for everything on-trail I've done, and I've done some pretty difficult on-trail stuff. Yeah, that is tough. It's rugged. 63 hours doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
So, yeah, and I came to the conclusion that I wanted to do, backpacking-wise, the gems, the really beautiful stuff that takes 4 or 5 days and then go home and take a shower.
Sure.
I'm not going to be a thru hiker, I think.
Yeah.
That's not my interest.
We get a lot of people listening to the show. We get feedback all the time because we talk a lot about thru hiking. Chauncey and I are both thru hikers. That's just kind of the world that we're entrenched in. The website that I run, the Trek, is catered largely to thru hikers. However, I think this podcast reaches a broader audience, as is the Trek, and people give us feedback all the time that we're a little too thru hiker centric. And we get a lot of people being like, "Why don't you talk more about section hiking or just doing shorter backpacking trips in general?" So you seem like someone that has the gear knowledge, the skills, the physical capability, and I'm guessing both the time and the means to do a longer thru hike. Why is it that you opt for these shorter hikes?
Yeah, so I did do one longer thru hike. It was 40 days. My wife and I hiked the South Island of New Zealand on Te Aroa because we wanted to get out of winter. And,
Smart.
And we thought, well, maybe thru hiking is for us. And what I found was there were some just beautiful, amazing sections, and then there were some other sections that were sort of like in between.
Yeah.
Or you might be hiking on a sheep ranch road for 50 kilometers. And, people would literally come by and say, "Do you want a lift?" And we would be like, no, we're hiking this whole thing.
Yeah.
And after a while, I was like, this is stupid. Sorry to your audience, but
no, a lot of them are nodding in agreement right now.
So maybe it's just that route. But anyway, and my wife was like, she loved it. She's like, "I want to go do the North Island." And I'm like, "Oh, you'll find another partner." So, yeah, I just, like I said, I want to go to the nicest spots, do some interesting stuff. I like the off-trail stuff. I'm interested if I'm, doing more stuff than just walking a trail, if there's navigation or technical, technical sections. Buzz and I have done a number of routes in Canyonlands National Park, which are, linking up different things. And
this is the triple trek?
Like the triple trek, yeah. So the triple trek there's 3 districts of Canyonlands National Park: Needles, the Maze, and Islands in the Sky. And so how could you link them all? And they're separated by rivers, big rivers like the Colorado River and the Green River. So, we came up with a route that we thought would go. But getting across the rivers is, without carrying a lot of stuff is kind of tricky. So the first time we tried swimming, and it worked, but it wasn't great because the water is damn cold.
Yeah.
And one of the swims was 3 miles downriver. And so we used our inflatable sleeping pads to kind of lie on top and not freeze to death. But it wasn't great. So then we came up with these little lightweight pack rafts from Supai. Those are terrific. They're just like very, very light.
How much do they weigh?
I think that the paddle plus the raft is less than 2 pounds. Maybe.
Wow. Damn.
Or around 2 pounds. But now, instead of becoming, let's survive this river crossing, it becomes a feature. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, we linked up those 3 districts.
How much of this route, what's the distance that you're actually pack rafting?
So when we did the pack raft, we did illegal because we didn't have a permit 9-mile downriver paddle.
Okay.
And that's because if people are unfamiliar with Canyonlands, the rivers are in canyons. You can't get in or out of the river most places because there's like 200-foot cliffs down to the river, like right into the river. So you can only find a little squirrely passage down to the river somewhere and a little squirrely passage out of the river somewhere else. So that's the tricky part of this whole thing, is finding those ways in and out of the river.
Yeah.
And with the pack raft, since we could float downstream further distance, it made it better. Much better.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. And then there were other sections where, you had to commit yourself to some scrambling, and you get to a spot and it actually didn't know if it was going to go until you got there.
Yeah.
So
It seems like high stakes in terms of relying on water sources out in the desert like that.
that's true. Yeah. So Canyonlands, you really have to know where the water is at.
Yeah.
And there are springs, but you have to know where they are and whether they're reliable.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
So are you doing it in spring for that reason?
Typically in the spring.
Okay.
Because we're just jonesing to go do something.
Yeah, right.
And yes, there's much more water in the spring.
Yeah.
Cool. So you've established some roots in northern Colorado as well? Is that true?
This is something that Pony had tipped us on. I'm not sure if this is inaccurate.
Yeah, well,
we can get on him for that.
Yeah. So I guess this would be more back into the fastest known time world, I guess. So I kind of specialize, like I said, in things that combine running, hiking, and scrambling, climbing, technical climbing. So, for example, there's this area of Rocky Mountain National Park called Wild Basin. And it's this big, gigantic basin. It has these amazing peaks, 13,000-foot peaks, and even Long's Peak, which is over 14,000 at the head of the basin. So I wanted to circumnavigate the entire thing. It's only 30 miles or so, but, there's some fifth-class sections.
Wow.
So just...
Are you using ropes?
No, because it would take too long.
Yeah. Aha.
So, these are like life goals because it takes a long time to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, every time you go to scout something, you've got a 20-mile day or whatever, and you come to a cliff and you can't do it, and you go this way and that way, and you go back home with your tail between your legs, and then the next time you go find a little sneak through.
Yeah.
And so, I spent years on that project, climbing all the peaks, doing all the little link ups, and then I tried it and I failed because I got rained off, and I came back the next year and actually linked that up. So
does your risk tolerance change as you get older and more entrenched with your wife, and do you have kids?
No kids.
Okay.
So my wife is upset about this whole thing, but
good insurance plan, life insurance plan.
I'm 57 in my age category. I'm not going to set any PRs for running a 5K, but I can do other things because I have more experience. So I've drifted more and more towards the scrambling stuff and linking up peaks, or here in Boulder we have the Flatirons, doing a big link ups in the Flatirons. And so actually my skill level with free solo rock climbing has gotten much better.
Interesting.
Even though I'm getting much slower at just running a trail.
Yeah. So does it follow that your risk tolerance is actually increasing?
Yeah. I mean, because the harder you, and I'm not soloing anything super hard, but the harder you solo, the more the objective hazard goes up. Yeah, beyond me.
Yeah.
If anybody watched the movie Free Solo,
yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm not doing.
Oh, I had sweaty palms the entire time.
Yeah.
Talking about it gives me sweaty palms.
That's much harder than what I'm doing, but
yeah.
But I'm combining, endurance with soloing, scrambling, and it allows me to go into like some super cool places that are hard to get to, unless you were going to really commit to backpacking or whatever.
Yeah. More rewarding, more skill. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's been my experience with the little bit of off trail remote stuff that I've done. Is the skill requirements are steep, but the rewards are also that it is worth it. So I'm jumping around a little bit. You mentioned that you did the South Island of the Tay Aurora. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to get that right. I've just thrown in the towel on that. With your wife. And Clay mentioned that your wife is also a very prominent endurance athlete as well. If you could kind of speak to maybe the adventures you do together and just her own accomplishments. Yeah.
So we're both getting too old for competition, but she was at one time one of the top female ultra runners in America. She set an age group American record for 24 hours, which means she ran around a short loop for 24 hours straight and ran 140 miles, for example. And she ran many ultramarathons like the Leadville 100, Hard Rock, Western States. So, very good endurance athlete. And so we could sort of meet on that. And she got into backpacking about the same time I did, also with Flying Brian. And she's really into it. And especially as we age, walking is just a lot easier on your body than running. So she got kind of obsessed with the John Muir Trail, actually. She's probably hiked it like 5 times.
Damn.
And, an amazing route. And once you figure out like the logistics of the John Muir Trail, it's really worth it.
Yeah.
The permits and...
The permit seems like the biggest logistic.
Yeah.
I was reading online yesterday. Someone got a permit for the John Muir Trail, and it says you can't be off trail for more than 24 hours. Otherwise, your permit's like you're violating it.
Interesting. They're trying to control the flow of
but
the...
it's like, can you not take a 0 day then? Can you not...
Not allowed to get injured.
Legally
Yeah.
need time to resupply?
Yeah.
And spend a night?
Seems asinine, although I'm sure there's a very good reason for it.
Well, yeah, the use... So this is one thing I've observed sort of everywhere, but it's exemplified by the John Muir Trail, which is that there are more people getting outside and doing things, but everybody wants to do the classics. So it appears to me that there's way more people hiking the John Muir Trail, and that's been confirmed to me by one of the rangers at the permit office.
Yeah.
But it also appears to me that there's less people doing other stuff in the Sierras. So if you want to go on these off-trail things, you don't see anybody.
Yeah.
But they talk about the John Muir Highway, and it's really true. There's a lot of people doing that. So I think they're trying to put in ways of sort of down-regulating the number of permits. They put in that system where there's only a certain number of people per day who are allowed to go over Donahue Pass. So that regulates how many people can be, because you could get a permit for the John Muir Trail. It starts at some other trailhead.
Right. Yeah. The last thing you want when you're in that pristine backcountry is to be in assembly line while you're out there. So the permits make perfect sense. It's just, some of those oddities are they're funny.
I heard a story through the Google Docs that you were at a party with a certain former guest of the show, and you pointed to a lady at the party who was a stranger and said that was who you were going to marry, and that is now your wife. Is that true? True or false?
Okay. That could very well be true.
Oh, you don't remember that?
No, I remember the party. I don't remember the statement.
Got it.
But I do remember we were 16. She was super cute. And she still is 40 years later. So, and I remember the party very, very well.
We'll go with that story being true because it's much better. And Clay is the ultimate romantic, so no way he would fabricate that.
He just gave up with a certain former guest.
Oh yeah, it could be anybody. It could be anybody.
It could be anybody.
Yeah. So Clay and I go back to 5th grade.
Wow.
Clay's a character. Do you have any embarrassing stories? Can we throw him under the bus right now from, I guess, really any age?
No, I don't know about embarrassing stories, but we really got into this whole adventure thing together through cycling, actually. Way back, there was this thing called the Bike Centennial, which was organized around the bicentennial of the United States, 1976, a long, long time ago. And so people were doing road cycling. Mountain bikes didn't exist. And we were too young to drive cars, so we got into it because it was how you got out of the house and were free and could go wherever you wanted. So in 77, we decided to ride our bikes from Yellowstone National Park to Vancouver. And we were 15 years old, and we had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
But we were
Did it take much arm twisting with your parents to allow that?
Somehow they seemed to be okay with it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we were the original lightweight bike packers. We had a tarp that we'd just throw over the bikes and sleep underneath. And it was super cool. We were 15.
You were using the bikes as the structure for the tarp?
Yeah.
That's clever. Is that a common thing?
I don't know. We didn't have enough money to buy a tent, so we bought a tarp. And
sure.
I still have that tarp, actually. It's like 10 by 10. and it worked great.
Huh. So I know you've done quite a bit of bike packing. It seems like you've dipped your toe in a lot of the different endurance sports worlds. And you mentioned this in an email to me that bike packing kind of informed your gear philosophy in terms of being lightweight. I guess if you could talk about some of the highlights from your bike packing adventures, and I know you just mentioned the Centennial. Is there anything else stand out that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so early on, it was about for me. I came at it from cycling, and I think the next year or 2 years later, we did a pretty long bike trip around the UK and France, which was super fun, and then it was just. I didn't do a lot of bike packing after that, but I was definitely a bicyclist. And when we moved back to Colorado in the early 90s, I got into mountain biking and did the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. And,
wow.
And I kind of got dragged into ultra running, sort of kicking and screaming because my wife was doing it. And I was going out on the bike and she was going out for a run all day. And, we were doing something similar, but not together. And then,
tie goes to the wife. That's what I've learned in marriage.
Well, and what I always found with endurance sports was that I could keep up with the best women. Like I wasn't the best male athlete, but I was about as good as the best women.
Yeah.
And since she was one of the best women ultra runners in the country, it worked out actually pretty well at that time. So I switched over to running, and the nice thing about running was you don't have mechanicals, or if you do, they're your body rather than a flat.
Yeah, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any particular reason that bike packing is no longer part of your existence, aside from the fact that you can't, or that that's not your wife's preferred sport?
Yeah, I mean, I literally haven't done a bike packing trip since the 1970s.
Okay.
But I've done plenty of biking, like riding the White Rim in a day or whatever, or long road rides. But yeah, running is just so, like hiking, it's so simple, you don't really care you don't care that much what the weather is.
Right.
On a bike, if it's really windy, it's kind of a pain. If it's raining, it's not that nice. If it's cold, if it's below 30 degrees, I can't go. My hands will get too cold. Mm-hmm. But running, you just lace up your shoes, put on another layer if it's cold. If it's raining, it doesn't really matter that much. You stay warm. So there's something seductive about it. It's so simple.
Yeah.
And then backpacking, you carry your stuff. If it's crappy, you just climb into your shelter.
Right. Right. So we've mentioned a couple times about your light and fast ethos. Can you run us through your typical big three for like shoulder season backpacking?
Yeah. So I some years ago bought a Cuban fiber tarp, and I know some people don't like tarps, but I think it's fantastic. The thing is gigantic. It's plenty of room for two people, and for one person, it's gigantic, and it weighs 7 ounces. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's great shelter. Maybe another few ounces for pegs and something to put on the ground.
Any particular brand?
Yeah, Z-Packs.
Okay.
And actually, I also got a Z-Packs backpack, which I really like, but I can't say it because I'm actually sponsored by Ultimate Direction, and they
we'll bleep it out.
They make fast packs, which are really good, actually.
But they're not dipping their toe into the DCF world, are they?
DCF
or the Cuban fiber?
Nah, we sort of experimented with that early on, but it's no. The answer is no. Okay. So, Ultimate Direction has, their kind of catchphrase is tools for the self-powered athlete. So it started as really kind of focused on ultra running, bottle packs for running. But it's branched out more into fast packing and other sports.
Yeah. They do great running vests. I've got one hanging right behind you, actually. Yeah, I know they don't really overlap into the backpacking world per se, but for trail running, I think is phenomenal. It's very comfortable. A lot of pockets. I love it.
Yeah, I mean they don't even use the word backpacking, but they talk about fast packing.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure what the difference is, but
right.
I always say the difference is, with fast packing, your focus is on getting from A to B as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. With backpacking, you might have a lot of different
interpretations.
objectives.
Yeah, right.
But fast pack, because some people would say, oh, well, fast packing is backpacking with running. Well, I don't believe that, because a lot of times running is not called for.
Yeah.
And it's hard to recover from running. So if you're doing something with a bunch of running, you may be slower than a hiker.
Yeah.
So, but Ultimate Direction does have, things called fast packs,
Right.
which are designed to carry stuff for overnight trips.
Mm-hmm. My buddy Jabba, often referenced on this show, it came out with his own backpack earlier this year by Mountainsmith. And I know part of the inspiration for what he was doing actually came from Ultimate Direction, the comfortable shoulder straps with the pockets on them.
Yeah.
I know that was an inspiration.
Yeah, so that's one of the innovations that we made when my friend Buzz took over as brand manager of Ultimate Direction was the vest style thing.
Yeah.
And it really did work well for backpacks, fast packs. Just there's something about the vest style that really rides very, very well.
Yeah.
And so
easier to access. I also feel like there's a component, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the PhD in physics from Harvard, of balancing the weight out, having more weight in the front as it's not pulling you back as much.
Right. Yeah. And most of the bags don't have hip belts. And so that's important to have the chest part fit really properly.
Right.
So that and to have that weight balance that you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. So Z-Pack's tarp, Z-Pack's backpack, we're bleeping, I think, one of those out. And quilt or sleeping bag.
Sleeping bag. I've never tried a quilt, but I like this. Some people don't like being like in a really tiny, tight space.
Right.
I like it. So
yeah. What do you use out of curiosity?
I have a Sierra Designs. So Sierra Designs used to be in the same larger company as Ultimate Direction. So
got it.
I have a Sierra Designs, 800 fill. It's really a, kind of a summer bag.
Got it.
Nice.
But I don't do a lot of cold season backpacking. So.
And what's the most luxurious item in your pack?
Luxurious. Yeah, I'm not really into luxury. Like I said, I like
no
to
Bluetooth speakers or anything like that.
No.
You should have seen the face.
I mean, I love the technology of I've hiked with Skirka and Flying Brian, and these guys are looking at the map and they've got their compass out, and it's just like so old school, and they're really good at it. But geez, you whip out your phone.
Oh, it's so easy.
With Gaia GPS on it, and you're like, just go over there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing. So
Right.
I take that as a luxury item because
so your iPhone or
smartphone, a little backup battery, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It just saves you so much time and uncertainty, and
certainly no disagreement on this side of the table.
I admire their skills with the map and compass, but
okay. So you're going to have to settle this once and for all, which is the correct nomenclature. So on the FKT website, I'm guessing you call it the Hard Rock Double. According to a certain former guest, he calls it, I like this name very much, the Rock Hard Rock. Yeah. So which of the two is it? And then obviously let us know what that is.
Yeah, so Hard Rock is a 100-mile race in Silverton, Colorado, which is probably the most difficult, serious 100-mile trail race in America. And I say serious because I don't put Barkley in that category. Barkley, I think, was started kind of as a joke, but it has become very, very serious.
Yeah.
But anyway, Hard Rock's an actual trail race, so maybe I should say it's the hardest trail 100-mile race. And it's a true 100-mile loop through the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. So 100-mile loop is pretty cool. And back in the early 2000s, I had run the John Muir Trail a couple times, which turns out to be 220 miles. And being from an ultra runner background, I thought, well, it'd be cool to see if I could run Hard Rock twice. So Hard Rock has a 48-hour cutoff for the race. And so that's kind of symmetrical. You run it one direction in 48 hours, you turn, and the other thing about Hard Rock is it's run in alternate directions and alternate years, since it's a loop. So I thought, and they say, once you've done it in both directions, then you're a true hard rocker. Okay, so I just said, well, maybe I could do that in 1 year. So I showed up 48 hours before the race. I was entered into the race, and with crew support, allowing myself to have support at the locations of the Hard Rock aid stations, ran the route backwards from that year's race, and then finished 6 hours and 45 minutes before the start of the race. Got a little shut-eye and a meal and a shower, and then got to the starting line of the race and ran the race back the other direction.
That is bananas. Did the other racers, were they aware of what you had done?
A few people. One guy who I'd seen on the first lap who happened to be camping along the route somewhere, and he's like, he sees this guy come running down the trail with a support crew in their little folding chair and, looking like somebody in a race, except that it's 2 days before the race. Yeah. And he's like, what the hell? And so I saw him in the race. And but as the day unfolded, I started running into aid stations, and people would say, oh, you're the double guy. So it kind of got around word of mouth as the thing was going on. And I got, further and further along. So
how'd you do in the race?
Well, I finished the race, which was all I cared about.
Yeah.
It was in mid-pack, basically.
That's very impressive.
I had run the race a couple years before. I had this idea to run the double in my mind for several years, but I was not sure if it was feasible for me. So I needed to run the race to see if I could run a time that it made sense, So I knew that time-wise, it should be feasible. The issue is lack of sleep, basically. And I knew about that from running the John Muir Trail and other experiences of lack of sleep. So I knew I had to be fast enough to be able to get, because going for 4 nights without sleep is hard. I needed to be fast enough to be able to get at least a minimum amount of sleep to not just lose my mind.
So does that confirm it that it is the Hard Rock double and not the Rock Hard Rock?
No. So when I was planning this thing, a few people knew about it, and this friend of mine, Jack Jewell, came up with that Rock Hard Rock 200, which I thought was really clever. And so I used that for sure. Yeah. I think that's good.
Let's officially call it that, because I think that's just a better name.
Yeah, it's a better name, but it's quicker to say the double.
You're true. You're not wrong about that. Yeah. And then I think the last thing that we've got a note here from Clay, and I know a lot of the questions
go way back.
We asked him to do our homework for us.
Yeah. He mentioned that spirituality and meditation was a big component of your life. I don't know if this is something that you want to talk about, but so I'm just curious, what does that practice look like, and does this inform or impact your endurance sports in any way?
It's a very interesting question. We could have a whole nother podcast, but I would say I came to spirituality in part through my experiences of doing ultra endurance activities. And I think it's not unusual because if you push the boundaries of your physical capabilities in terms of just, how far you can go, how much you can do without sleep and things like that, you will start having transcendent experiences.
Right.
And
hallucinations
and all kinds of things. And I mean, there's a reason why people get addicted to hiking, but doing big thru hikes.
Right. It's not because it feels good.
Well,
or maybe once you break through the bad, there's good on the other side of it.
Yeah. And there are transcendent experiences that happen. And for me, because I'm an analytical, scientific person, I kept having these types of experiences, which were clearly outside of my normal day-to-day life. And, at first I would have an experience and it would help me finish my event because, all of a sudden whatever was happening that was bad turned into, joyful. And So at first it was just like, cool, I finished my event. But after that happened a few times, I was like, what is this thing? What's going on here? And so that led me to a spiritual path, which I've been on for a number of years. And what I discovered was that you can actually have those experiences without running for 80 hours without sleep. And, in the Buddhist traditions, all the traditional spiritual schools, they know about that. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we in regular society don't.
Yeah. Is there a particular practice that you follow, or is anything that you'd want other people, or you think someone listening to this might be interested in following up and learning on their own?
Yeah. So I'm actually very immersed in a particular spiritual school called the Ridwan School, which is based in Boulder and Berkeley. It's a modern spiritual path that was developed. The founder of the path is still living. And, people say when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And that was true for me. I wasn't never looking for a spiritual path. But I just sort of stumbled into it, and it just happened to be based in the town that I lived in. But I don't necessarily advocate for that path. It works really, really well for me. There are many true spiritual paths, and I think everyone needs to find what works for them. Mm-hmm. Be it meditation or various types of practices.
Yeah.
The importance is the practice,
right?
And the orientation, to live your life from a real place rather than, just caught up in the spin and the churn of, culture.
Yeah. Meditation was a big part of my first thru hike, AT 2011 mm-hmm. drink. And I honestly don't know if I would have been able to finish the trail without meditation. I have an entire section in my book about it. I'm actively trying to reincorporate it in my life, just because I'm so overwhelmed by work. Oftentimes I find that when I'm my busiest is when I need to actually carve out the time to find some awareness in my life. So it's good to, I don't think we've actually ever touched on the subject of meditation or spirituality before. So I think it's an important subject to touch on, and maybe you can come on another time and we can go deeper down that rabbit hole, but I don't have any other questions if you don't.
No, that does it for mine too.
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on. People listening to this, if they want to learn more about you or get involved in the FKT world, where should they go?
fastestknowntime.com.
Okay. Any social media plugs, anything else you want them to follow up on?
Yeah, we have social media, and I'm like, I do not do social media. Other people do the social media for our website. So I'm just like, I'm not going there. So
no problem. We'll dig it up and put it in the show notes. So again, thank you so much for your time. I know we probably only scratched the surface in terms of your endurance accomplishments, but maybe we can get you back on the show in a future time.
Love to. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
That interview was brought to you by Greenbelly. In case you're not already familiar, Greenbelly is the maker of one of the most complete nutrition bars on the market. Their meals contain 650 calories each, more than 2.5 times the energy of a Cliff Bar. Think of them like cereal bars on steroids. Because Greenbelly meals are ready to eat, requiring no stove or cleanup, they make the perfect midday trail meal. Their meals are super light and made with wholesome ingredients with flavors like peanut apricot, dark chocolate banana, mango cashew coconut, their new flavor, and mine and Chauncey's personal favorite, the cranberry almond. They taste great and are handmade fresh every week. Chauncey and I both love the texture of these bars. They're dense but still soft. They're also not too sweet, which is a nice change of pace in the world of sugary meal replacement bars. And the bars are great for long distance treks, as the founder, Christopher Cage, is himself a thru hiker. You may recognize that name from his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. And good news for you, our wonderful Backpacker Radio listeners, you get an exclusive 10% discount site-wide at Greenbelly. Just use code TREK10, that's TREK and the number 10, at checkout at their website, greenbelly.co. Don't wait, this deal is only good for a limited time. Okay, back to the show. And thus concludes our interview with Peter. Super interesting guy. You can tell there's a lot more meat on the bone in terms of story for him to tell. But the room was getting very hot, and I had to pee very much, and he was being incredibly generous with his time. Okay, to the Trek propaganda portion of today's show. Again, this isn't so much Trek propaganda as it is just news in general. Though we did cover it better than anyone has in the history of time. It was fantastic. Sorry to get so Trump on you guys there.
Your small hands are showing.
Oh, shit. My hands are totally normal. Anyways, so two pieces of news that are, I think, very much related. Hiker Heaven on the PCT is for sale. That's the one in Agua Dulce, the Softleys. If you've hiked the PCT, there's a very good chance that you've stayed there. We did when we hiked through Southbound. I didn't get a chance to meet the gentleman behind the scenes there. We definitely met Donna Elrod. She is awesome, very opinionated. And then the other piece of information is very proximate to Hiker Heaven is Casa de Luna. That is closing. You can get more information on both of these hostels going through a transition phase and or closing. I'll obviously link to these stories in the show notes. And I hope that we have a bit more insider information here shortly. Mm-hmm. Foreshadowing. Ooh. And then Scout and Frodo.
Also closing.
Yeah. And there was another one. Or did I just make that up?
Well, there was the Dinsmores up in Washington, but that closed after my year.
Yeah, she passed away.
Those were the four big ones.
Yeah, so the Trail Angel / hostel, I guess more Trail Angel scene on the PCT is changing. I feel a little bit bad for anyone hiking after the year of 2019 because they're going to get a very different trail from like a cultural standpoint. So we hope to have more information on these changes coming shortly. Again, foreshadowing. Okay. To our new favorite segment. This is a Chance invention. And by that, I mean, we just ripped it off from our Backpacker Radio intern application form.
Yep.
We should give a proper shout out. Do you know who that came from?
Nope.
We'll figure it out and we'll get the proper credit here at some point or another. But so unpopular opinions. Today's actually a little bit different format. It's going to be an unpopular question.
Yeah.
One that Chance and I are both going to answer ourselves. And then we would love for you guys to weigh in through our social medias. Okay. I'll let you pitch it.
Okay. This is one of those things that I don't know why it kept me up one night. Because I was like trying to figure out where the exact line was drawn and I couldn't. So the question is, how long does a trail have to be for it to be a thru hike? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that because I think we've mentioned that we're going to be doing the Trans-Catalina Trail.
We haven't. So you just broke some news.
Woo, okay. Spoiler alert. Don't tell me about surprise parties. Me and Zach are going to be doing the Trans-Catalina Trail in the early November time frame. And that one is only 38 and a half miles. So is someone that hikes the Trans-Catalina Trail a thru hiker?
Yeah.
And if not, if it's too short, then what is the minimum length of a trail for it to be a thru hike?
So what's your take?
I don't know. Because I was like, oh, well, maybe like triple digits. Because like if you did the Tahoe Rim Trail, that's what, 165?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
I just guessed. But
it's somewhere in that range.
Would you then be a thru hiker? I would say yes, right? But does that discredit the people that then do 2,000 plus miles and then they're thru hikers? I don't know. This is a whole bag of worms. Is that the saying? I think so.
My particular answer to this question is, how long does it have to be? I think it has to be a minimum of 270 miles.
Where do you get that number?
I'm hiking the Long Trail next week, and that's 272 miles.
Oh.
So I wanted that cred. It fluctuates with whatever trail I'm doing at the time. But as of today, I'm going to go with a minimum of 270 miles. No, it's a really good question. So I don't think, obviously something like the Colorado Trail, I think.
But then that would mean the John Muir Trail wouldn't be a thru hike.
That's
because that's 220.
Is that what all it is?
I think that's what.
Is it 240? Let's look it up.
We just said it in the episode.
Yeah, no, but I already forgot.
I think Peter said 220.
John Muir Trail is 211.
Oh, okay, even less. Super not.
So that guy's super not a thru hiker.
But then, like, what about when you and Jenna do the Tour de Mont Blanc? Mm-hmm. Is Jenna then a thru hiker?
We're disqualified just because of the way that we're doing it. We're not carrying a tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad. We're just going from hut to hut.
So you have to carry a minimum amount of gear?
We're not going to be thru hikers because we're going to be ending the trail fatter than what we started. And let me clarify.
Hey, I gained 3 pounds on the AT.
4 pounds. Roll back the tape.
You're fat shaming me right now.
No. And I'm talking like body fat percentage. We will end the trail with more body fat around our stomachs than what we started, and therefore we're not thru hikers. Maybe that's where we should draw the line.
How fat?
If you get fatter on the trail, not weight, again, you gain muscle, you're still a thru hiker, but I'm going to come back looking like Homer Simpson. That's my goal for this hike.
I think we should open it up to the audience. I don't know if that's
so.
Sufficient.
What you have to have a thought on it.
I went triple digit in my head, but like I don't personally care about the word. I don't have that sense of like it defines me the way that some people do. But I just like triple digit sounds good in my head because it's, you know, if it's longer than 100 miles, chances are you'll be out there for at least a week. It takes some sort of planning. And like the Tahoe Rim Trail, many people do go and do things like that. The Wonderland Trail is not that long, is it?
It's a skosh under 100 miles. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
I want to say 97 maybe.
But there are trails out there that are in that 1 to 200 mile range that people will hike from start to finish and take off time from work to do. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like we do the thru hiker meetups, and a lot of times we'll ask people if they're thru hikers or like what their backpacking background is. And a lot of times they'll come up and they'll be like, oh, I just hiked the Colorado Trail. They kind of hang their head because I think there's this sense that, you know, everyone is AT and PCT hikers.
Yeah, and then it's like, dude, that's like 500 miles.
Yeah, that's like more backpacking than 99.99% of the population. So it's kind of a silly question, but I think a fun debate to spur, maybe debate's not the right word, but just a fun conversation to spur up.
Because it's like, what if someone does, excuse me, what if someone does the Tahoe Rim Trail and they're like, okay, I've done 150 plus miles, under 200 miles, I'm a thru hiker. And then someone gets 2,100 miles into the AT and injures off. And they're like, oh, I didn't thru hike. Or let's say 1,900 miles, because I know there's that 2,000 miler thing. But let's say you injured, wow, my voice. Let's say you injured.
I'll tell that dog hair. Chance comes over to my house and dies every single time because it's just like animals exploding.
I usually can push
everywhere.
the words out. Yeah. So let's say they got off 1,800 miles in because of injury.
Yeah.
So they're standing there saying, I'm not allegedly standing there saying, I'm not a thru hiker. I got off trail. And then someone who's only done 150 miles is like, I am a thru hiker. Does that weigh into it at all?
So you guys have to weigh in. Let us know. What do you think?
These are the thoughts that keep me up at night, and I couldn't figure it out.
Which is quite literally true. Chance slept till what was like noon today?
I slept till 11. I was up at 8 every other morning, though.
Yeah. I like that you quickly followed up with that. I was trying to get some logistics done this morning for our upcoming
the one day Zach
tour.
works.
Yeah, and I was sending her a text at like 9:30, and she didn't respond until like 11.
You sent me a text at like 9 a.m., and then at 10:30 you sent another text that was like, or don't answer.
Yeah. So yeah, Chance likes to sleep in.
Yeah, whatever.
Let us know at Backpacker Radio on Instagram, at thru-hiker pod. I always forget.
Thru-hiker pod?
No, that's the trail correspondence. God damn it, I'm blending our accounts together. I'm just trying to do some sly promo for trail correspondence. At Backpacker pod on Twitter. Can you communicate with us on Facebook? I don't know how social media works.
You can definitely send messages on Facebook.
Yeah, or you can fax me at...
Beep us.
Okay, last segment here as we come stumbling through the finish line. Patent pending.
Okay.
Do you have yours?
Yeah, I wrote mine below where you wrote yours.
Okay. Mine's very brief, so
okay.
Get ready to give it.
Get brief.
So this isn't so much the science behind it. I'm more of a marketer. So I need to team up with someone who has a really good idea for apparently getting mildew out of like a tent, sleeping bag, whatever, is virtually impossible from what I know. But once we come up with that technology, that's what my partner will come up with. I've got the perfect name for it. And something that gets rid of mildew will be called...
Mildon't.
Mildon't.
Yes.
Nailed it.
I already like it.
But that'll be a very expensive product. I'm already going to get the intellectual property for the follow-up, the generic, which will be Mill Maybe.
Okay, I like it based off that.
Yeah. So that's all I have.
Okay. It gets a spot in the store for that.
Mill don't.
It Mill does get a spot in the store.
Ooh. No, Mill, you didn't.
Oh my
I
God.
wagged my head just to emphasize that point too.
It was like that Z-snap. Oh God. Mine is gut hooks with friends. So it's kind of like find your friends, but gut hooks. So basically I'm just telling them to make an update to their app where you can add friends and then kind of like find my friends. You can see where they are on their gut hooks while you're on gut hooks. So it's like little dots that are kind of chasing each other up the trail.
Could you do this with the Find My Friends app?
I don't know. I've never downloaded it or used
Same.
it, and
It just feels like an invasion on
it feels like it would be
privacy.
like harder to convince randos I meet on trail to just download a different app and give me their stats. Like,
Yeah.
hey, let me find you. That sounds creepy. But if it's like a trail fam that's like coming together and it's like, oh, let me see where they are because I'm about to leave this lunch spot.
Yeah.
And then you see that they're like 2 miles back, and it's like, I'll just head out.
Now, it's not in the spirit of patent pending to shoot holes in the other person's idea, but I'm going to try here. So is this publicly available? Like, if you're sharing your data, can anybody see this, or you just are able to select who's able to see your location?
I think it has to be like you add a friend.
Got it.
Like I add your Guthook's username.
You already solved my one question.
Yeah. 'Cause
Goes
I
in
don't
the
want
store.
everyone knowing where I am.
So do we get to put it in our store, even though we're just adding on to somebody else's product?
Yeah, we can patent the idea, and then Guthook's has to buy it from us.
You hear that, Ryan?
Yeah.
I'm coming for you, buddy. All your good ideas are funneling through Backpacker Radio. Okay. To Chauncey's favorite part of the show, the iTunes reviews, 5 stars.
Woo.
Take it on.
Okay. Also, guys, leave more 5-star reviews. I like reading them, and I keep refreshing them, and there aren't.
This is literally Chauncey's life fuel.
We're
This
in a
is-
deficit right now.
The reason she's not able to get the words out is because there's not enough 5-star reviews coming in. So if you want Chauncey to crumble into the pile of cinnamon that she is deep down, just continue with the status quo. But if you want her to persist as the thru-hiking powerhouse that she is, 5 stars.
Yeah. We're both gingers. We get another freckle every time. It's like the meaning. What was it? The meaning of what was the? It's a Wonderful Life. Every time a bell rings, an angel
I don't
gets
like
its
when
wings.
you're dating me on old references.
Ha! Every time a 5-star review is left,
Wait.
a ginger gets a freckle.
On that note, you made a reference to something via text that I did not get, and this was a demonstration of our age gap. Will you please tell the crowd what that is? Because I'm curious to know.
It was a SpongeBob reference.
Okay.
It was the one where he's like, they were always jealous of him because he was number one.
Yeah, that was way over
And
my
Zach
head.
didn't get it, so I sent him like memes and gifs of the he was number one guy. I can't say his name. It's Schmitty. Oh God.
So if you have any idea what the fuck she's talking about,
Some people will.
don't say anything. But if
Schmitty
you're on my
Werbin
team,
Schmitty Werbin Jagerman Jensen. He was number one.
those sound like sounds to me. Okay, 5-star reviews.
Yeah. I did it by Skeptical Ed. Yep, I did it. I've now listened to every new and old episode of Backpacker Radio, all 45 so far, and 2 seasons of trail correspondence while hiking up and down a local hill. A medical emergency in January got my attention, and these podcasts have been my constant companions for about 450 miles. Maybe someday I can hike the AT. Maybe even when Zach finally decides to hike it, like Chauncey just did. Just saying.
It's a good idea.
Burn.
Should consider that. And this next one comes in from Burn the Vote, BERN, get it? Where Sounds of the Trail left off, BPR has my full attention. Hey guys, future at some point through hiker who binges anything hiking related, and I have to say, this pod is great. The Viking episodes were hilarious, and just listening to everything covered about the PCT and AT keeps my wheels turning. Completed the Maroon Bells loop and looking to hit the Smokies in a few weeks, fingers crossed, and I can't stop listening to anything hiking related. It's addicting. End of ramble. Cheers to many more episodes, guys. Thank you so much, Burn the Vote. If you guys want to have your wonderful words read on air and prevent Chauncey from crumbling into a pile of cinnamon, you can leave us a review on iTunes. Any number of stars will do, as long as it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4. Thank you to our Chuck Norris Award winners on Patreon. That goes to Christopher Marshburn, S11N, Sawyer Products, Todd Cartner, and Travis Smith. Social shoutouts, you can follow us on Instagram at Backpacker Radio, on Twitter at Backpacker Pod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Backpacker Radio. Also, we just did a Facebook Live. Didn't just do it, we did it last week. Kind of a stream of questions came in through that Facebook thing. Chauncey and I rambled for another hour or so on video. If you guys want to check it out, definitely give us a follow on Facebook. You can follow Chauncey.
You can find me on Instagram at Juliana_Chauncey, on YouTube at Juliana Chauncey, and on Facebook at Chauncey Hikes.
I'm Menzie Ardeos on Instagram and Twitter. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We love you guys, and happy hiking.
Bye.
Oh, I was just returning the cursed soda drink hat to its original owner, Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen.
What?
It was his hat, Mr. Krabs. He was number 1.
I've been out walking slow, many miles I've yet to go. I've never been one that's had to choose, but every time